When the pesticide DDT was invented, it was hailed as a major public health achievement, and its inventor was awarded the 1948 Nobel Prize. In 1955, the World Health Organization began a program to wipe malaria off the map using DDT, and it was highly successful in doing so, but only in areas with high socioeconomic status, well-organised healthcare systems, and relatively less intensive or seasonal malaria transmission. Africa was never included in the WHO's project, and it never got much of a look in before DDT was banned. The West, meanwhile, wiped out its malaria problem. Following panic reports that DDT was harmful to the environment, it was banned in the USA in 1972. This led to an effective worldwide ban, as countries dependent on US funding wouldn't risk using the pesticide and upsetting the West.
But not all countries have toed the West's line. Mozambique intends to start retesting the use of DDT in the battle against malaria because no reliable alternative has been developed. Other countries, including Zimbabwe, have also said they will start using DDT again. Integrated strategies which include larvicides, insecticides and DDT have enabled South Africa, Botswana, Swaziland and Zanzibar to largely eradicate malaria.
South Africa has been able to deal with malaria because it has the freedom to decide on its own course of action and not according to diktat from donors.
If a person gets malaria, they can either die or recover and have temporary limited immunity. Those with no immunity are more at risk. This is why the disease particularly affects children. Rates of infections of malaria are well known to be directly linked to the presence and size of mosquito populations in an area. In places where there are mosquitoes, they tend to be inactive around dusk as the temperature falls and the air becomes more humid. They also tend to be associated with water and are prevalent around rivers, streams, wells and other freshwater sources.
So why do multimillionaire businessmen and religiously inspired politicians publicly advocate something that doesn't actually solve the problem? Sadly, it's because activists in malaria-free countries have an irrational dislike of chemicals. Buying a bed net for someone poor might make you and the celebrities who endorse the bed net campaign feel good about yourself, but it also sends a powerful message to Africans about their place in the scheme of things. That is, at the bottom, where the most they can hope for is to put a charity-donated flimsy shield between themselves and their harsh environment, rather than transform their environment.
DDT's modern use as a pesticide was discovered in 1939, and almost immediately the Western world took to it. With its low cost and high rate of success, it was used everywhere from farmlands across America's heartland to homes in suburbia. Indeed, eradication of malaria by using residual insecticides had been attempted and had even been achieved in several countries before the general acceptance of the eradication concept in 1955. As images of the developing world's plight are beamed into the living rooms of the developed world through television, we postulate there simply must be a solution to the problem. Ignoring the fact that DDT had worked so well for us, we marshal together a hodgepodge of solutions that include ever-mystifying bed nets and ineffective lesser pesticides that Western scientists deem safe. This position paralyzes the developing world to this day.
It's interesting to note the change this represents, since for many years countries were effectively keeping malaria at bay by using DDT. From 1950 to 1980, when DDT was extensively used in agriculture and malaria was wiped out in the West, more than 40,000 tonnes were used each year worldwide. Today, only 4,000 to 5,000 tonnes of DDT are used each year for the control of malaria, with India being the largest consumer. India, China and North Korea, in fact the countries most demonised by environmentalists, are the only countries still producing and exporting it.
DDT has never killed or made anyone ill. Malaria has killed millions.
There is another annoyance that I have with the West, and this is how they promote days such as World Malaria Day or Make Poverty History. All this does is tell us the same as it did the year before and the year before that, which is that Africa is poor, Westerners feel guilty, and the message is Africans are helpless children. Africans don't want pity, are not interested in Western guilt, and don't want phony health campaigns. We want the restrictions on DDT use to be lifted.
In 1943, DDT famously stopped a typhus epidemic in Naples in its tracks shortly after the Allies invaded. DDT was hailed as the wonder insecticide of World War II.
Southern Mediterranean countries, such as Italy, where hot and humid conditions would normally be a fertile breeding ground for malarial mosquitoes, have been malaria-free for more than 60 years.
Uganda's Ministry of Health recently studied 410 children who had been given insecticide-treated bed nets and instructed in how to use them. Within 2 to 3 weeks, 52% of the children were again infected with malaria. Dr. Roger Bate, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy Research and former chairman of Africa Fighting Malaria, says that although bed nets can help in combating malaria, if they rip, or if you don't go to bed early enough, or if you get up in the night, you can get bitten. Bate favours indoor residual spraying, IRS, with DDT. The fixation on net stems from opposition to IRS, he says. The idea that Africans must hide behind a charity-bought veil for their whole lives, rather than buying a tank full of DDT and killing the pests that threaten to kill them, is disgustingly patronising.
So why was DDT banned when it had already done so much good? An influential factor was Rachel Carson's 1962 book, The Silent Spring, which played up fears that DDT would damage wildlife, particularly birds' eggshells. In her book, Carson lumps together chemicals used for fighting weeds and insects that were proven to have side effects with DDT, for which there was no proof of side effects at all. Carson died in 1964, 2 years after her book was published, so she missed the demolishing of her theories by the scientific community. But the anti-DDT bandwagon rolled on after Carson's death. Panicked and prejudiced responses to all things chemical began to become more mainstream in the 60s and 70s and are very common in political life today.
Roy Innes, National Chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, says the EU should be saying that DDT is safe and poses no threat to EU consumers. Instead, they make either direct or oblique threats about possible trade sanctions. What they're really saying is, we've benefited from DDT and gotten rid of malaria, but you people in Africa cannot do the same. Anti-pesticide activists claim insecticide spraying does long-term damage. They are wrong, on financial, practical, public health and moral grounds.
What of the environmental concerns? There is no evidence to suggest that the method we used to eradicate the disease a half-century ago cannot be safely implemented to eradicate the disease in the developing world today.
I believe everybody should be treated equally and not patronised and offered joke cures like bed nets. We would like to live at dusk and not in a bed net, and it is the West's bans on DDT that prevents us from doing so. In some ways, this is the most anti-human lying crusade of our times, because the West didn't eradicate malaria with bed nets, and neither will Africa.
The charity nets are not a $10 solution, they're a $10 insult.
The ideas of biodiversity and sustainability, as well as animal rights and general reluctance to intervene in nature, mean that malaria-carrying mosquitoes get let off lightly, whilst literally millions of contract malaria and die.
I'm glad that I live in the UK, where the chances of getting ill or dying from malaria are practically nil. But I want the whole world to be free of malaria and other mass-killing diseases. Who wouldn't?